hub,
and spoke. Audio Collective.
Hey guys, it's Mike Rogie from Mountain Gazette.
This is Kat Craddock from Sever.
And we have both been on this podcast feed, and this is the Best of Summer series. You should subscribe to Kat's magazine.
You should subscribe to Mike's magazine.
There you go. That's our ad. Ads are dumb. Magazines are sweet. Enjoy the pod.
Control is new from Commercial Type, originally drawn for interview by Christian Schwartz and Miguel Reyes. This sans serif is designed for flexibility and can bring tasteful modernism or 70s tight-knot touching exuberance to any layout. See Control and download a free trial version at commercialtype.com.
We paid everyone very small amounts of money, but we did pay people. But, it really was just asking for favors. Like, it was gigantic favors that all of our contributors were offering. And it really was like all of our friends. And, that's how it started. And, luckily, our first issue of 1,000 copies sold out. So we had enough funding to do another small reprint of that. And then that sold out. And then we're like, oh, okay, maybe we can keep this going. We had no business plan. It was terrible.
This is Print is Dead, Long Live Print, a podcast about magazines and the people who made and make them. I'm Deborah Bishop.
I'm Patrick Mitchell. Michele Outland has spent her career at some really beautiful magazines. Beautiful because she made them that way. Her resume includes stops at Martha Stewart's Everyday Food, Domino, Nylon, and Bon Appétit, as well as the magazine she created and launched with her good friend, Fiorella Valdesolo, Gather Journal. Gather, which only published 13 issues, made a powerful impact on the magazine business. In its 5-year run, it won a James Beard Award for Visual Storytelling, an Art Directors Club Award, and 20 medals from the Society of Publication Designers, including being named Brand of the Year in 2015. Under her leadership, Bon Appétit won the ASME National Magazine Award for Design, along with a slew of SPD awards. We talked to Michele about the power of internships, about her Korean mother's influence on the way she thinks about food, about how to start a magazine in a post-print world and when we can expect the return of Gather Journal, about the strong female role models who shaped her career, and of course, we talked about pizza.
Let's talk about young Michele. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was actually born in Lubbock, Texas. My father's side of the family is very much from the Texas, Oklahoma area. But when I was 6 months old, we moved to Colorado. And so Colorado is where I grew up until I was 18. But, moving around Colorado here and there, but mainly Golden, Colorado is where I spent my formative years. Claim to fame is Coors Beer. And I loved growing up there. The mountains are beautiful, all that sort of stuff. Very outdoor lifestyle.
What did your parents do?
My dad is an architect. So he was actually in Lubbock going to Texas Tech. So he studied architecture there. And my mother's Korean. So they actually met in Korea when my father was an engineer in the Army. But my whole life, as far as I can remember, my dad's had his own architecture firm. I think, I was thinking back on it in terms of how it's influenced my career, that I think both my parents are very entrepreneurial people. My dad's had his own architecture firm my whole life. He's retired now, but the firm is still in existence. So I think both of them have been great role models for me in terms of having somewhat of an entrepreneurial spirit, but also a hardworking ethos. And my mom also, she's done a variety of things, started her own fashion clothing business that produced silk garments out of Korea. And then she's also run just different other businesses as well. So they've always been very enterprising and entrepreneurial, which I think has been a big influence on me.
As we'll find out soon, so were you.
Growing up, what was your first memory of design? When did you start thinking it was something you might want to pursue?
I mean, I've always been into the arts since a very young age. And, art class was always my favorite in school, favorite class in school. And I think my parents definitely recognized that. And so they very kindly invested in me going to art camps during the summertime. And that was hugely influential to me. And then, as I got older and knew that perhaps a career in the arts was something I really wanted to pursue, my dad, who is he's in the business. And so he was like, okay, let's really think about like what you like the arts, but like what part of the art are we talking about here? And, that's where I was in high school and I kind of didn't know. And he was like, well, look, I my office space shares with a graphic designer. Why don't you go over and speak to her and learn about what she does a little bit? And so I went over and met this woman, Christina Weber, and I sort of credit her for my whole career. She changed the course of my life, and we're still in contact, and she's just a wonderful person. But she had a design studio in Denver and mostly specializing in print collateral and branding. And she gave me my first internship when I was 16 and just like literally had no idea what graphic design was. But I spent the whole summer there, and it really sort of changed the course of my life.
That's amazing. Were there magazines in the house when you were a kid?
Yeah, there always were.
Did any in particular catch your eye?
Well, my dad always had Architectural Digest around, being an architect, but Time magazine was always in the house. I remember, obviously, my grandparents, I think a lot of people of that generation had National Geographics around. So I definitely remember those. And then as far as like the magazine that was hugely influential to me was when I went to start my internship at Weber Design. And it was my first day, and I was kind of sitting in the back room, just not knowing what to do. And Chris brought over a book by Neville Brody. And she was like, I want you to just sit and look through this. And I was like, what is the Face magazine? And like, what? You can design typography? And that really just like shot me into a whole nother direction. And so I really became obsessed with the Face, and that whole genre just really took me in a whole nother direction.
You were able to find copies of the Face in Denver?
At the time, no. But once I went to college, it became a regular purchase that I would splurge for.
Yeah. Where did you go to college?
So then from there, I was very excited to be accepted to the Rhode Island School of Design. So that was my first time away from Colorado, and did the big move to Providence, Rhode Island. And then I ultimately became a major in graphic design at RISD. At that time, I had interned for Chris for 3 summers. And I was just very thankful that by the time I got to college, I knew what I wanted to do. And so I felt like hopefully I made my experience very valuable because I knew what to focus on very quickly.
And when you were at RISD, did you do internships there too?
Yeah. So again, I think I interned for Chris one more summer, maybe between my freshman and sophomore year in college. And then I think they were encouraging us to find internships while I was in college. And so I found this company in Boston called Moore Moskowitz Design. And I started interning for them while I was at summertime in college. And that was a husband-wife team, Jan Moskowitz and Tim Moore. And it was quite a small studio. Most of the time it was just them. And again, hugely influential in my career.
Did you stay with them throughout your time at RISD?
I did. I interned for them for a couple summer, 2 or 3 again. And then I was very excited when they hired me straight out of school. So after RISD, I went to work for them. But, as is with the design business, they were very small studios, just the 2 of them. And at that point, I actually think we were like working out of their house. So I would commute to Brookline and work in a room in their house. And it was great. I loved it, but it wasn't at certain points sustainable for them. Business is hard. So they had to let me go at a certain point. And I started working with another design studio in Boston called Eimer Design, another husband-wife, Doug and Selena Eimer. And they were also so wonderful. And I learned a lot there too.
How did you get started in magazines?
I think at that point, I'd been in Boston a couple years, and most of my friends from RISD had moved to New York City. And so I was sort of itching to move to New York. But also when I was working for Jan and Tim was British, and he used to be an instructor in England. They taught me a bit about British design, and I was always like, I want to go check out London. And they were like, oh, we have some family friends that you could go live with them and be a nanny for their kids. And I was like, okay. I was in my 20s, and so I went to be an au pair. But right before I left, I came to New York and tried to have a bunch of interviews and just dropped off my resume wherever I could. Nothing was sticking. So I was like, all right, let's just go to London. So I went to London and was an au pair for 2 wonderful kid, and tried to get a little bit of design work and went clubbing and really enjoyed London. And
Did I see something about Central St. Martin's in your resume?
yeah. And so, like, while I was there, I definitely learned about Royal College and Central St. Martin's and just kind of tried to take in the design scene and ethos in England, which I think is incredible. I love the level of design there.
Did you go to Neville Brody's house?
I didn't stalk him to that extent, but pretty close, actually. I think I tracked down his studio. But while I was there, somehow my resume had gotten passed on to Martha Stewart Living. And one of the art directors, James Dunlanson, he's British, he happened to be in London. He was visiting his family and got in touch with me and was like, oh, I'm in London. Could you interview? And I was like, okay. And so I met him in London and we sat down for an interview. And I was also like, I have never done magazines. I don't understand what you do. Could you tell me a little bit about it? And James is an incredible art director. And so he was very gracious and explained a little bit about like how the process works there. And I was like, wow, that sounds really cool. And amazingly, they offered to hire me after that interview. And so that helped bring me back to the States. And I mean, I had to leave the country anyways. They didn't want me there anyway. So it was great. It was perfect timing. And that helped me move to New York. And that was my first job in magazines, was at Martha Stewart Living.
So in addition to the creative titles you've added founder. That's pretty special. Talk about how Gather Journal got started.
So, I had gone through a series of working at various magazines, from Martha Stewart, various publications within that, to Domino magazine, which is another big title from Condé Nast. And then I got an opportunity to work at Nylon magazine as their art director. And it was the complete opposite world of both of those. Martha and the Condé title were pretty decent budgets, very corporate. And Nylon was this cool downtown magazine, independent, but, a decent publication rate. And it had always been a title that was influential to me as a designer. The editor-in-chief, Marvin Scott Jarrett, founded Ray Gun. And, obviously David Carson was his controversial art director, but hugely influential in the design world. And so I really wanted to have the opportunity to work with Marvin. So, it was very different from the path that I was on in terms of this sort of bigger corporate path. And so I took a huge pay cut and went to work at this downtown magazine. And it was a wild time. Really, it was like every month you were like, that's a miracle that a magazine came out, because it was a bunch of 20, 30 somethings and I think Marvin has and I've learned this from like a lot of people in my career, especially Martha as well, is a great way to run a place is to surround yourself with really great people and let them do, the best that they do. And to a great extent, that's how Nylon was run as well. We were like really left to do our jobs. And it wasn't, you need to be here at this time, but it was just like, make sure magazine goes to the press at the end of the month kind of thing. And do whatever you have to do in between kind of thing. So, it really was this new experience where I was, it was an extremely small staff. I had been used to these staffs that had full art departments, full production departments, full photo department. And, suddenly it was an art department of me and one other designer. And we had to interface with advertisers and get their files in and to explain to them how the file needed to be. And, it was like a whole nother level of, from beginning to end of designing a full magazine, color correcting it yourself. I mean, we did have a production house that ultimately, but, you had to mark up all the color and proof every single page, including ad pages, and get a magazine out every month. And so I learned so much, and it was wild and crazy, but it was such a wonderful time, and I learned a lot. And after leaving that job, which might show a consistent thread in my career, is really at the end of it, I burnt out and it was time to go. So, when I left, I took some time, and quite honestly, I was baking a lot of bread. And this was, way before the pandemic, before everyone was baking bread. And while I was baking bread, this food magazine came into my head. And I had met Fiorella at Nylon magazine. She was the beauty editor at Nylon, also deputy editor as well. And we were great friends. And we all, one big thread between our friendship is that we love food. We both have immigrant parents. And I think food has been a really big part of holding on to our culture, learning about our culture through our families. And then also we just eat out all the time and talk about food all the time. And so we had this common interest. But I think also beyond that, the fun thing about Nylon was that it was a fashion, beauty, culture magazine. And these were all topics that really greatly interested us. And so, we were like, how do we take what we learned from Nylon and put that into another format? And so we kind of developed this idea of this food magazine that was a little unconventional and covered art and culture as well. But at the end of the day, I also brought a lot of what I learned at Martha and wanted people to really cook from it. And so that was why we set it up as a recipe style magazine, but with a lot of layers on it and, visual layers, editorial layers.
We'll be right back.
Print is Dead is made possible with the support of Mag Culture. Read our online journal, listen to our podcast, and visit our shop to discover why we're convinced print is very much alive. All available at magculture.com.
How did you pay for it?
Our own money. So we had some savings and we went in 50-50. And, with the money that we had, which was very little, we printed 1,000 copies. That was our first issue. And we were like, we hope our parents buy some copies, and then asking a lot of friends.
Were your contributors working for free?
We paid everyone very small amounts of money, but we did pay people. But, it really was just asking for favors. Like, it was gigantic favors that all of our contributors were offering. And it really was like all of our friends. Like we were, I was asking all of my photographer friends. Fee was asking all of her writing friends. And, that's how it started. And, luckily, our first issue of 1,000 copies sold out. And so we had enough funding to do another small reprint of that. And then that sold out. And then we're like, oh, okay, maybe we can keep this going. We had no business plan. It was terrible. It was, we really just, I think for both myself and Fiorella, I think we have this true love of art and creativity. And that was really why we started Gather. It was not to make money. And I also want to point out that magazines will not make you rich.
How did you get it out in the world?
Grassroots. I really I live on 12th Street and I walk down to Casa magazines, which I love that they're getting a lot of press right now, but I've known them for all the years that I've lived in the West Village and was like, would you maybe sell my magazine? And they were our first stockists. I literally walked it down to them and asked if they would sell it. So it was very grassroots of us just like walking into stores and being like, we have this thing. Can you maybe sell it?
You were selling it internationally too, weren't you?
Yeah. And so, thankfully again, just so incredibly and so thankfully that the first issue was so well received and got quite a bit of press. And, again, the power of press is pretty impressive that the word got out. And thankfully from there, we really didn't have to market the magazine. We were able to everything was people getting in touch with us.
For our listeners who maybe haven't seen it, it's really genuinely one of the most beautiful magazines ever.
You.
So it's a little bit on hiatus now, right?
Yes. We published for 6 years and we produced 13 issues. So we did 2 issues a year. And at the tail end of it, things just in our lives started happening. Fiorella had a child and motherhood, and I took on a rather large position at Bon Appétit. So it was just, for the way we sustained producing Gather was through freelance work. Gather was not our full-time job by any means. We shot issues of Gather on the weekends, and in the meantime, we freelanced. And so I have a big freelance career at working all over the city here, and I'm thankful for the city for that. And that's how we were able to sustain and produce Gather by, having these freelance jobs and doing Gather as a real passion project. And then just when these other bigger life things happened, our passion just got tired. And so we just couldn't physically do it.
It's a lot of extra work.
Yeah, it's a lot. But again, every time an issue came back from the printer, it was just so thrilling. So it's something we'd love to return to if we can.
What's your favorite thing about magazine making and your least favorite?
It's funny because I'm actually teaching a class this semester at Art Center. I'm teaching a food photography class at Art Center in Pasadena. So I'm working with all these young photographers, budding photographers, all very talented. And, obviously it's sort of odd that I'm not a photographer teaching a photography class, but I think hopefully what I'm bringing to the class is showing them how our commercial world works. And the main thing that I'm trying to impress upon them is how collaborative our business is. And even from a photo shoot to a magazine, it's incredible how many people it takes to put it together. It is not a one-man show by any means. And so, that's something that I'm really trying to impress upon them and anyone else who's listening, that I do think a big part of this industry that I love is interacting with people and interacting and working as a team to, and especially, for example, the relationship between me and Fiorella. I think she's a genius editor. She's a genius editor. She's a genius writer. And when we came together to form Gather, I knew that she was the best at what she does. She knew I was best at what I do. And so we were like, you handle words, you handle visuals. And we really left it to each other. We very rarely would stray over and be like, oh, no, but we would if we needed to. We absolutely could say it, but there was a lot of trust.
There was mutual respect and
Yep.
trust. And do you think that, talk about your best relationships with editors and how is that? I mean, obviously that was a special relationship you had with her.
Totally. I mean, I think, for us people in the art department, I think it really, the memorable working relationships with editors typically comes from an editor who's really visually minded because, our job is to translate the editorial content that is brought forth to us, if not collaboratively developed with them. And we then translate it into the visual. And we have to be able to articulate our feedback on their content. And it certainly helps when they can articulate feedback on our content as well. So it's sort of, the more it can be sort of a two-way conversation, I think it, that makes the memorable working relationships. And it makes, obviously, the strongest content. That is ultimately all of our goals, is to how do we take these worlds of written and visual and translate that into this one cohesive piece that's, engaging and moving. For me, it really comes down to communication.
Pretty much you've been working on food and fashion.
Yeah.
What is it about those areas that attracted you?
I love the visuals of food. I think oftentimes before we actually have that experience of taste, we have sight and smell. I love figuring out a transformative visual for food or a visual that helps explain what that food is about to taste like. So there's that visual. And then, obviously, I think fashion is not too far from that in terms of, something that excites the eye and can be very transformative to someone who wears it. But, clearly very obsessed with the visual of food. And then I think, certainly the direction that I took the Gather's visual, because I had been certainly very well trained in the world of Martha. And I'm so thankful for all the training that I learned there, which was much more sort of a naturally lit type of food photography style, which I think she was hugely influential. Gail Towie especially helped drive that visual in terms of at the time when the magazine was founded in 1990. And I think they were huge in that development of photography and learned a lot from it. And I'm so thankful for that. And then I think the time we founded Gather, I wanted to try and look at food in a slightly more cinematic sort of way, because I love the experience of being in a restaurant or at a dining table and how the lighting and the color of the room and this and that really sort of transforms that experience. And so trying to, I think with the visuals of Gather, get more atmospheric and transportative.
You've been involved in a lot of startups and redesigns, and you've created a look and feel for some pretty legendary brands: Martha Stewart, Everyday Food, Domino, and of course, Gather. How do you think about creating design systems for big brands and starting them from scratch?
I clearly enjoy it. And I've been, so honored to be brought in on those initial teams. I think it goes back to that entrepreneurial spirit from my family that I just love getting in on the get-go. But it's been really, especially with the experience of Everyday Food and Domino, especially with those two experiences, there were very specific briefs walking into that. Everyday Food was a small digest-sized magazine, and Martha she had a lot of input, and I learned a lot from her in terms of how she would walk up to a wall and interpret a page and interpret a recipe. And it was great. I learned so much. And then with Domino,
She has incredible vision.
yeah. It's like, if you just try and think about everything that she's managing and has in her empire, and then can really just like hone in on something, it's fantastic. And then with Domino, also, it had a really cool brief. They had other shopping magazines at Condé at the time, which was Lucky and Cargo. And so they wanted to start interiors magazine, shopping based. But the brief was to design this magazine that was like your best girlfriend giving you decorating advice. And it was such like a strong visual brief that you're like, all right, I know who this girl is. All right, let's like figure out the visual for that. So I've been fortunate that they've been really fun sort of briefs from the get-go. So it is kind of fun to be there at the inception and think about sort of what the personality of that title can become. And then certainly with Gather.
How technical do you get in terms of the nitty-gritty and the InDesign and the templates and the columns and all that stuff? Are you sketch and hand off, or you do it yourself?
At the time, especially with Martha, I was very technical. And again, I am so thankful that I got that experience. I learned so much. Gail Talley was hugely influential and really taught me about setting columns and grids and templates and systems before just getting carried away with like, let's get just design, you as a young kid, you're just like, oh, I have fonts and let's design, let's go crazy. And like, that's when you really sit down and look at magazines, they are built on systems. They have to be built on systems because they have to come out every single month, and you can't reinvent the wheel every single month. So to a certain extent, there should be a system there. And, you can't say you can't break that every once in a while. But again, I'm very thankful that I had that training in the beginning. So I was very involved at the time with Martha and did a lot of special issues for them and books. And so I was very much part of choosing fonts and building templates and all that sort of stuff. Further into my career now, I'm not.
How's it been working in a fairly male-dominated business for all these years? Have you felt stereotyped at all to women's content?
A tiny bit, yes. But also at the same time, I have felt that I've had incredible female role models, and I'm so thankful for that. And again, it starts from the very beginning with Chris Weber giving me my first internship, to Jan Moskowitz, to Martha, to you, Deb, that I'm so thankful that I learned so much from you also. Yeah. And so it's just, throughout my career, I've had incredible female role models. But yeah, I do feel like it is hard not to say that a lot of the field is male dominated, and certainly women typically are, working on women's titles. But it's very funny. We had this meeting when we were doing Gather, and we met this store owner from Japan, and it was a very formal meeting. It was very interesting. And we were brought into the room, and business cards were exchanged, and then we all sat down. It's just very big ceremony kind of. And then like the first thing he said was like, I thought Gather was done by men. And I was like, not sure how to react to that. But I was like, I might take that as a compliment, I think.
We'll be right back.
Print is Dead is made possible by the support of the Society of Publication Designers. The SPD powers the future of visual storytelling, setting the standard for editorial excellence and shaping the future of visual culture. For more information, visit spd.org. Was there a certain area of content or a certain kind of magazine that you might have wanted to work on or still might that's not typically female?
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe like Gather is the closest that we've gotten in terms of, I don't think we made it look like a typical sort of women's title. And so I think in some ways, maybe it's kind of androgynous, which interests me. So yeah, if anything, it's kind of, we'd like to like keep expanding what Gather is in terms of food and art and storytelling.
You can launch a grilling magazine for men.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sure, why not?
I like that idea.
I think there is a British magazine for grilling. It's called PID. Have you seen that, Michelle?
Oh, yeah.
We need to go further than that, though. It needs to be makeup for men.
Yeah.
Exfoliating.
Yeah.
That's
In my research, I saw some photos, and I just have to ask, where did you get that big-ass couch in your Conde office? It looked like it seats like 10 people.
It was gigantic. Photo tricks, that was not my office. That was actually the corner in the art department. So all the designers used to sit next to that big couch. So they had the nice windows, and I was in an office like inside. So sadly, it made it look quite luxurious, but not reality. Don't believe everything you see on the internet.
I'm going to guess you didn't get to keep it when you left.
No, sadly. I would have no room to put it. But yeah, that was a good couch.
So you just spent a multi-year run at Bon Appetit doing some of the best work out there, the best design work, best photography work in the magazine business for quite a little run. And that ended this past summer. What happened?
To be completely honest, it was burnout. Yet again, I just completely burnt out and I just didn't have any more gas in the tank. And I wish I did because it was a job I really enjoyed. It was a huge, really different type of role, unlike anything I'd done. But I was kind of going back to your question earlier, Deb. I was really proud when I got that position. I felt that all of my years of experience earned me that title. So I was really excited to join the team and ideally bring my experience in food to the title. And I think I did. It's funny because when I got there, you see this in the magazine industry a lot in terms of waves of staff changing. And I think, again, people burn out and then, waves of new teams come. And so when I came in, I was on the tail end of a wave of folks that had been leaving the title, again, from what I understand, burnout. So I had to build a brand new design team, a whole new staff, like from scratch. So I built a whole design staff and a photo team. And, within that couple of years, was really proud that we turned out some award-winning work. But again, it was ideally really finding some really great, talented people and like letting them really do the best that they do. But
it took its toll.
Yeah.
The editor who hired you notoriously had to go in the middle of your run at Bon Appetit, and suddenly you find yourself working with a new editor. What was that like?
It was the reality of what happened, and that's...
Did the mission stay the same, or did the new editor bring a new perspective on the magazine?
Certainly, and I think any person does. So, I think any working relationship with any creative director with their editor-in-chief is a new relationship that you work together to achieve a goal. And so it was good. It was, I think I had clear briefs with both editors and didn't disagree with the briefs. And, I enjoyed working with both of them. It's just the sort of reality of the business that things change and you need to be professional and do your work as professionally as possible. And so it was challenging for sure. But again, still really proud of the work we did. Unfortunately, at the end, it was just burnout.
It was such a big job for somebody who is so creative and has been so hands-on in the past. How did you deal with the stress of that? Do you have a favorite swear word?
Unfortunately, I probably internalized it too much. I think most people that know me know that I'm a pretty quiet person. But yeah,
I do. I know that you're quiet. So that's why I'm wondering, how did you deal with it? I'm sure very calmly and with grace, as always.
a Negroni in the evenings was, a fantastic soother for lots of stress. But I loved the challenges that were really different, in terms of, I wasn't just working on a magazine, and that was not my sole focus by any means. I was also part of my team was a branded content team. Part of my team was a fully digital team. And so it was dealing with the scope of print, digital, branding, events. It was massive. And Instagram, something to talk about the future of our business here, how much time and focus went to Instagram content. It was a lot, and I learned a lot. As challenging as it was great.
You had a huge team. So what was your strategy for building the team and restructuring, recreating a new team?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, it's finding those key people that that they are so strong that they can lead as well. So I think having a really strong design director who was Chris Cristiano, really strong visuals editor who was Michelle Heimerman, and just had incredible staff photographers and branded content art directors. And so, having those key people that help build that structure, I learned a lot in terms of I can't do everything. I can't be, everywhere all the time. And so I need to trust those people to handle X, Y, and Z for me to review later. And again, I think as long as I think the lack of micromanaging certainly helps give people confidence. And I hope I instilled that, hopefully. They'll probably be like, you micromanage too much. But
when you went to Bon App, did you hire people that you had worked with before?
No, everyone was brand new, whole new set of folks, which was great. It was a wonderful experience too. And I think also it just goes back to the fact that I'm just, for 10 years before this, I freelanced. That was all I did. I went from place to place. And I actually feel like that really helped me in my career and as a designer. Changing places, changing systems, learning new people really helped me grow. I know it's not the conventional career path, and, some people look at resumes and have red flags and so on and so forth. But, Deb, you kind of mentioned just that I am sort of this creative spirit, and I think that taps into my own personality.
Speaking of food, there was a quote I saw that you said your last supper meal would be a slice of New York pizza. From where?
100%. It would be from my local in the West Village here, Village Pizza on 8th Avenue. Everyone, check them out. They're wonderful.
Are you familiar with a Palermo pizza?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I'm not sure. Maybe you should re-explain it to me.
Breadcrumbs and caramelized onions.
Okay. That
sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
I think we're getting hungry.
Yes.
My favorite slice is, do you know Ben's on, I think it's on Spring Street and Thompson?
Yes, Ben's Pizza of Soho. That would maybe be my very close runner-up. Love Ben's Pizza.
Usually if I've driven to New York, I'll spin by Ben's, just pull right up there and get a Palermo for the road. Highly recommend.
Nice. I will check. I always get a New York slice when I go in there, but I will get a Palermo next time. I'll check out the recommendation.
Well, so you and Bon App broke up, and at the time of this interview, we just got the news that several high-profile, kind of legendary magazines were being shut down by the new company that owns Meredith. How are you feeling about the future of magazines and your future doing them?
Yeah, it's obviously extremely sad. I hate to see any print title go, and I also know it impacts a lot of people in our industry. So feeling very, very sad about that. But that is maybe the $1 million question in terms of where are we going in this industry, and it's a really tough one. I think just thinking about how we consume content and just where we are today and where we're possibly going tomorrow, it's obviously extremely digitally based. I know some of those titles might still be producing digital content, but it is really tough because there's something so different from editorial print design to digital design that I feel like the digital space hasn't captured that yet. And I do feel like at least some of my thinking, even when I was at BA, was how do we translate our printed editorial experience into digital? And I do think that the New York Times does an incredible job at their digital translations, and it's exciting. And I think that is a path forward to keep an eye on of how, I do think somehow we need to keep pushing the digital experience. And I know we tried it at one point, and I was part of it with Martha, with the iPad experience. And I imagine we're going to be revisiting that again. But also just how people are accessing it. There needs to be something that's a little more streamlined somehow. So it's a tough question. And I do think, again, I know it was mentioned when Gather was certainly in circulation, the influx of independently printed publications. And, we might be heading towards a place where when we do print, it's specialty high-end printing possibly. And, being a little more tailored in when we print and how we print. And, maybe the traditional convention of monthly mass market publications is unfortunately like what happened this week. It's not something that the industry is sustaining.
Do you think that there would be a way to create Gather Journal, for instance, only digitally? Could you share how you might want to do that in a creative, innovative way?
Possibly. We did do a recipe app for Gather. That was probably the closest translation that we did. The app actually, unfortunately, is no longer available, but we still offer our recipes online. So those are fully accessible with the photographs that we created for it. The biggest part of the creation of Gather are the recipes and the visuals. That's the biggest part of the budget, minus the printing costs. The printing cost actually was the biggest part of the budget. That being said, thinking out loud here, I'm like, oh, wait, actually, maybe we could do it and not spend all of our money on printing, unfortunately. But, again, that's the thing. I'm just like, I'm not sure if Gather would be as impactful in a digital space. I would be sad not to see those images printed on the paper that we found and printed on, and really researched and worked with the printer on how to replicate the type of imagery that we produced on that kind of paper. There was like this really big love of craft that went into that. And so that makes me sad, but I'm also like, I don't know if people care. I don't even know if they would notice the difference, but I did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You said in a Folio interview, there's something about holding a magazine. It's very captive in a way. Digitally, I just feel like we're exposed to so much content, which leads me to the next question. That's sort of the foundational question for this podcast. Where can a great magazine maker take these unique format-specific skills? Magazines were the product of editors, designers, photographers, illustrators, writers, all combining their skills to make these beautiful objects and on a schedule. They had a life and an ongoing relationship with their audiences, and there's really just nothing else like them. Where can these skills be applied now?
Yeah, I was, again, thinking about that question and, trying to distill it down to its core in terms of what is it that we're all passionate about that we stay in this industry and keep doing. And it's not an easy industry to be in. And just sort of thinking about like what we were consuming content-wise during the pandemic. But I think at the end of the day, we're all interested in storytelling. And I'm sort of curious how we can keep telling those stories and in what format. And, obviously, I think the streaming services took off during the pandemic, and binge watching TV shows, we couldn't consume them fast enough. But, part of me, again, the lover of arts and culture, I'm sort of thrilled by it in terms of the fact that we as a society still love at its essence storytelling, and sometimes the storytelling helps us translate what we're processing in the real world, which is a lot recently. So I'm hopeful that there are still places for us to tell our stories and work with teams of people to tell the stories. That being said, maybe I'm going to go off and make a TV show. I don't know. going back to like, do magazines still have a place in all of this? And I think they do. I think they'll just be a little more specialized. And I don't want to say the word thoughtful, but
yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, you could look back now and say magazines have been so incredibly underpriced for decades for what you get for the money.
Yeah.
And back then, you could get a subscription to Esquire for $7.
Yeah.
Those are the old days mistakes.
Among other things, you're currently freelancing at Apple. The other day, we were talking to a creative director who said, quote, "For the amount of creative firepower Apple has scooped up from the magazine business, the end result, at least in Apple News, doesn't really show it. What's everybody working on in there?"
Well, that's the tricky thing with Apple is that we are not allowed to talk about it at all. So we sign really huge NDAs. So I unfortunately can't speak about it at all.
Can you talk about what you're working on?
Unfortunately, no. But, I do think what I would like to say is that I'm interested in this sort of next phase of not being in the editorial world. I've been in the editorial world for so long. And, suddenly I'm not on this cycle of I have to produce an issue every month and however many digital content pieces and this and that. And again, I think it sort of goes back to where my career started in a way of having to translate just information into visuals. And I'm very intrigued by it in terms of suddenly being in a different space and format to produce content. I don't know. It's an interesting next phase. And I know Apple is notorious for scooping up the editorial world. And so, yeah, I'm very curious by it.
I can tell you from my own experience, there's nothing like working for yourself. Do you have any plans to begin producing Gather again? And if so, what would that look like as a business?
We would love to. And I agree with you. Working for yourself is so thrilling. I mean, again, every single issue of Gather was so rewarding. It was thrilling to get that first box of printed issues and tear it open and look with one eye because we were afraid of typos and mistakes and everything, but still very thrilling. We would love to do it. I think we are older and maybe a little wiser now, but I think for us to be able to do it, I think quite honestly and just frankly, we would need some money.
I can't imagine you haven't been approached by a publisher.
We haven't. So anyone who's listening out there, no, we never were. But we would love a silent partner. No, I don't know. That would be the dream, right? But that was also how we could have full creative control and feel really satisfied by the end of the day. But it, like we said, took 100% of blood, sweat, tear, passion, all that sort of stuff, working nights, weekends. And I don't know if we just have that stamina in us at this point anymore. But, creatively, we would love to do it. But I do think the business model needs to look considerably different.
Since leaving Bon Appétit, Michele has been doing some freelancing, including a current stint working at Apple. For more information, visit micheleoutland.com and follow her on Instagram at MichiButtons.
If you'd like to connect more deeply with our guests, be sure to visit our website where we have complete transcripts of all our interviews, along with portfolios, archival photos, links, and other great information. Visit longliveprint.co/interviews for more. Print is Dead, Long Live Print is a member of the Hub and Spoke Audio Collective, a nonprofit association of audio storytellers dedicated to promoting and sustaining high-quality independent podcasting, including the Peabody Award-winning Rumble Strip, the #1 podcast according to both The Atlantic and The New Yorker, who described it as a limitless podcast about life in Vermont. In each episode, host Erica Heilman invites herself into people's homes to find out what they know, hate, love, what they're afraid of, and what makes them more like you than you'd realize. These are the messy, obsessively crafted stories of the everyday. For more, visit rumblestripvermont.com or find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Print is Dead, Long Live Print is made possible by support of listeners like you. If you'd like to contribute to keeping the podcast going, there are 2 easy ways. 1. Become a sustaining patron by making a monthly donation, or 2. Make a one-time donation in the amount that works best for you. Visit printisdead.co/support for more information.
Print is Dead, Long Live Print is a production of Modus Operandi Design. For more information, visit our website, printisdead.co. Or if you're an optimist, longliveprint.co. Follow us on social media at PrintIsDeadPod. Please give us a like and a review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps. Thanks very much for listening.